One of my very first ghostwriting clients I ever worked with is a gentleman who invented telepresence technology. Before Skype, before Zoom, before any of that stuff, there was this fellow. And one of the pieces of advice that this entrepreneur gave me was that the most profitable lessons in life are caught, not taught. That's why you are going to catch the principles behind the best way to say it. I expect this video that you're about to see to be extraordinarily useful to you, but it's going to be you catching them in action, seeing the practice behind the theory, the application of the principles that's going to make this masterclass that you've watched just now some of the best time you guys spent all week growing your communication skills. So let's get right to it. When you are examining your piece of content, the first thing that you need to do is brain dump. Get everything on the page that you could possibly say. This, sometimes people call it blue sky brainstorming, brain dump, a stream of consciousness. Rewrite. This is the very first stage where there is no self-censorship whatsoever. No idea is wrong. Put everything on the page that you can possibly think of. You may have 300 words, you may have 3,000 words. Let's say you're working on a short form piece of content for the purposes of this. Let's say it's a 500 or maybe even 1,000 word piece of content. You've got your one topic you're going to write about. I highly recommend that you start with a keyword. My favorite tools for keyword research so that you know you're writing about something that people actually want to know about is Keywords Everywhere. In addition to Keywords Everywhere is TubeBuddy. I highly recommend both of these tools for your search engine optimization. In fact, they're so useful. They are a bonus in this masterclass. So go check that out once you've gotten the principles and you've grasped their application, which again will save you an extraordinary amount of time and money as well, because you won't need to hire a $1 per word or even a 10-cent a word ghostwriter or freelance writer, because you will be fully equipped to write it right yourself the very first time. So here's how you're going to do that. After you've done this complete brain dump, you've got everything you could possibly say on the page to the point that if you sit down to write, there's nothing else that you could type. There's nothing that flows out of your fingers. Your fingers onto the topic at hand. Here's what to do from that point. We're going to borrow a tip from TED and TEDx applications. When you pitch a TED or TEDx talk successfully, as I have in the past, one of the most important things you have to do is answer the question, what is your big idea worth sharing? For this piece of content that is going to be maximally persuasive, you've got this brain dump content. It's kind of all over the place. It's stories, examples, maybe a random statistic, or you teasing out a point you'd like to make in a bunch of different directions. You need to ask yourself, what is the big idea worth sharing here? That's the question every TED and TEDx application asks you, and that's the question you need to ask yourself as you're staring at this piece of content in the making, this clay that you're going to shape into a beautiful vessel of persuasion. So, what is your big idea worth sharing here? The one point you're trying to make. Maybe it is a news story that you're giving your take on. So what is your one piece of opinion? What is the one thing you want to make sure people take away from this piece of content? Maybe it's a story. So what's the point of the story? Not just the story itself, but what are you illustrating? What are you trying to show or teach? One thing, the big idea worth sharing. Maybe you're making an argument for something. You are putting a case out there. What is the one statement that you want people to take away from that article and agree with it? Or maybe it's insight, not information. I have not at any point said you should just be writing to share information. That is one of the dumbest pieces of advice people get out there is, oh, to grow your blog, to grow your online platform, you need to give more information, content. No. If you are not giving people insight about the information you're writing, there's no point to read your article, to watch your speech, to read your book. We want insight. So maybe you are writing a piece of content that is designed to be on your blog, to drive organic traffic to your company blog, allow people to learn about what it is that you do as a profession. They need to come away with insight, even if they don't hire you. Come for the insight, stay for the execution, which is what they hire you for. So remember that. Big idea worth sharing. That one thing you want people to get across, whether it's 500 words or 5,000 words, and put that at the very top of your piece of content. In fact, I even recommend you put it in bold so that you have it as your North Star, your north on the compass, whatever you would like to use as your analogy here. Make sure it's in bold at the very top of the document. So it's going to guide everything else from this point in the editing and the shaping and the massaging process for your piece of content. Okay, so now you have got your big idea worth writing about. What do you do at this point? You've got all this content you've written out and it's kind of all over the place. You can't publish this in good conscience. So what are you going to do? The very next thing you do is structure. The restructuring process of this piece of content is going to include 3 very simple things. That's it. Not 30, not 300, just 3. Number 1, what is the opening of your piece of content? I'm going to give you a piece of advice here. The first line, the first sentence is the salesperson for the rest of the piece of content. So as you think about the opening, you need to know that the purpose is to hook people from the very first sentence. It's not just the opening, it is the salesperson. It's what's going to motivate people to read past the first sentence, past the first paragraph, down through the entire piece of content, and glean the insights from your content that you want people to glean. So, let's get clear on what's going to come next. The opening. After the opening, where you first explore your idea, you put it into context, and I'll give you examples of this here shortly. From the opening, you have the main points of the story. So maybe this is the plot points. This is what exactly happened in the context of the news story that you are sharing. It could even be 3 tips, 5 steps, 7 insights, 6 myths, 10 what not to do's, 10 to do's. But these are going to be the insights section, is the key points. After the key points comes, very simply, your closing. The closing is not a restatement of what you said. One of the worst pieces of advice, almost as bad as just sharing information, putting it out on your blog there, is to say what you're going to say it, and then say what you just said. Waste of everyone's time. That is not an auto read. That is, didn't I just read this? Feels like you're not respecting my time, but telling me what you just told me. Avoid that. The purpose of the closing is to give people one thing that they're going to do, one thing that they're going to think about, and make this as explicit as possible. If it's a company blog, then I highly recommend you Netflix-ize the piece of content, meaning you bring up something that came up in the article, an alternative question, a different path that it makes sense to take. If you learn about topic A, you should probably learn about topic B. Send them there. If there was a strategy that you explored inside your piece of content, it may actually make sense to invite people to book a product demo where they can see the strategy in action, or maybe even a discovery call, or watch a video where you go step by step exploring that piece of content, that strategy, the execution of it. Whatever it is, make sure it is a direct, explicit, cannot possibly miss it piece of closing content. So now you know what the three things are. You're going to basically repurpose everything you've written into these three sections. So here's what you'll do. At the very top of your document, remember, you've got in bold your big idea worth writing about. And on down from there, you've got a few pages of random notes that you just stream of consciousness wrote down there. So you'll put a dividing line between the big idea and all the content below that. And so now you've got a small space below your big idea worth sharing. You're going to put those three sections. I highly recommend you use bullets. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Opening, points, closing. And then what you're going to do is scroll down the page and look at, first, what are the points you are making? Copy, go to the points, enter or return, and then paste them right there. Essentially what you're doing is you are restructuring everything you have according to what you know needs to be there. Follow that to the closing. What is the material you've already written that follows this structure? Basically, what is the call to action? The one thing you want people taking away from this article to do next. Where have you written that? Copy or cut and paste it right there inside of the closing section. And then, of course, whatever remains either is cut entirely, goes to another piece of content entirely, or perhaps can be used to set the context for what is going to come for the rest of this article. So that way you've taken this material, you were able to repurpose it into your simple 3-section outline. Now what happens? You want to see, do I have everything I need? If I'm making a strong point, or let's say I'm making an argument, do I have evidence to back it up, or am I just stating it? For example, let's say that you are a real estate agent and you want to talk about a particular area of the country that you would like to work with clients to move to. Let's say you're in Texas, for example. Maybe your piece of content is about the advantages of moving to Texas over a different state. Maybe there's a specific city where you are a specialist in selling property in that location. Maybe you're writing a piece of content that's about selling property, in this case, nice, beautiful homes in a particular area. Maybe Houston, for example. You're located in Houston. What you do not want to do is say something like, better hurry, the median prices of Houston, Texas homes have increased by X% over the last 12 months, and not provide any proof of that. Not a smart play there, friend. Anytime you can offer evidence, a visual is best. So in this case, you know what I would do? I would pull a graph, stick that thing showing the increase of prices. But if you're thinking of moving to Houston, you better get in now before they get up to be too expensive here, folks. Now is the time. The visual alone is going to be urgency. If you are quoting an expert, don't quote them. Grab their tweet or an excerpt of their speech on YouTube, whatever that's going to look like, and embed it right there in your piece of content. This also goes a long way to giving readers a break from the flow of the block of text, which is another little tip I have for you. Anytime you can break up the text, you are going to do your readers' eyes a favor. People do not like these massive walls of text, these massive blocks of text that are difficult to read. So breaking those up with headings, always a good idea. The key points, always a good idea. Not just one continuous piece of content just sitting there. You want to break it up visually. Okay, so back to your opening. Now you've got your opening, you've got your points, you've got your closing. What's going to be the best salesperson for the opening of your piece of content? Well, it depends on what it is that you're doing. Remember, this first sentence from here on is going to sell like your livelihood depends on it with this piece of content. Because all things being unequal, it is. That said, if it's a news story, put people right in the setting, in the middle of the action. If you're telling any kind of story, put people right at the very beginning of the action. Don't give us 3 or 4 sentences of backstory. Just simply tell us the who, the what, the where, and the when. Those 4 things for telling any kind of story. Your story, a client story, a news story you're giving insights on. Even the story of someone famous, you're giving a little bit of background information to. You don't need to get into the setup. Get right to the inciting incident as quickly as possible. You might be able to say the who, the what, the when, and the where for setting our context and setting what's happening here in just the first sentence alone. And then from there, focus on the action of what exactly is happening. Who is doing what as you tell the rest of the story. If you're sharing insights, if you're giving a strategy, any type of a how-to piece, it's going to be a little bit different. I strongly recommend you build the need. You make the case for the strategy to come. So one common thing that I do with strategy pieces, with teaching pieces, with tips or tricks or tactics or techniques is to go in depth right out of the gate of why you're going to do it this way. So if you can speak to what people have tried that hasn't worked, if you can speak to their motives, if you can speak to their intent, if you can speak to their desire, either their desire of what they want or what they don't want, which is more of the same, that's the first sentence, the second sentence. Because we want to orient people for how this piece of content is going to benefit them right out of the gate. If you are doing, again, any type of teaching in your article, very quickly right out of the gate, you want to communicate the benefits of that. And all benefits take 3 forms. There is some sort of practical value that takes place. Might be called functional, might be called application, may be called real world benefit. So explore that a little bit. What are they going to be able to do better? What do they want to be able to do better or do well and get a specific result? You can speak to that value right out of the gate. You also want to speak to how people feel. So for example, maybe there's a lot of frustration you've sensed with the way people have done it in the past that needed a change for this time around. You can speak to that as well. You can also speak to how they're going to feel as they implement whatever it is you're going to teach them, how it's going to be different from this point. Again, you are selling them reading the rest of this piece of content or listening to it or binging everything from there. And then, of course, the third way you can turn a benefit into a vivid, gotta have it, need to have, not just a nice to have, but a need to have, is to explore any monetary benefits. So is this going to help them make money or save money? Work those 3 practical, real world, I can see it in my mind's eye benefits. The practical benefits of doing it your way, the emotional benefits of doing it your way, as well as whatever the monetary value looks like that you're going to be providing in your piece of content. This works whether you are selling Telescope software or you are selling turmeric supplements. It works every single time. That is your opening. I also recommend a simple credibility building, authority establishing statement here. In the same way that I open this piece of content, this video right here, explaining a little bit about my expertise, you would do the same in every single piece of content, usually towards the beginning. In fact, if you can work in how you know what you're talking about with the points that you're making, either the plot points of the story, or you're communicating a tip, a trick, a strategy, or an insight you've gleaned from a personal example, show how you have been able to help others through those three lenses: the practical, the emotional, the monetary value you have provided, or you're going to be providing. So let's say you have 5 tips to write a better article. And each of those 5 tips, I better see an example of how you have written it better for yourself, or you've written it better on behalf of a client. And give a little bit of background so I'm like, wow, you did this for that person? That's pretty remarkable. Allow me to see the result of what it is that you've done. If you're giving, let's say, a market research tip, or a selling tip, or a fitness tip, casually but directly reference clients that you have helped get results. You don't have to do this by name. You can anonymize them. If you're really concerned about them knowing who they are inside the article, use a composite where you're combining 2 or 3 different real-world clients into a single person named Joe or Sundar or what have you. And so that way you'll be able to actually teach a real-world example, but without any privacy concerns. If it's a particularly sensitive topic, like let's say a health-related issue. So that is the best way to teach any type of points, right? Remember, that's the second part. So as you're pulling your content that you've brainstormed and putting it into each of the points, realize you need a vivid example that people can see themselves in. This can be, again, your example from your own world. This could be an example of one of your clients, one of your customers, or even an example that's possibly famous that people have heard of before. Whatever it is, there has to be some type of I can see it in my mind's eye, not just theory, which is why within this masterclass, you're going to see everything I've described in the last 20 minutes or so worked into real pieces of content. You can see me editing, developing, reshaping, all in real time. So that is what you must do inside of your points. From there, you've got the closing. We've already talked about what the call to action can take. As quickly, as shortly as possible, get all of this across. So, wrap it all up here in 20 or so minutes. That is how you restructure raw note, stream of consciousness, piece of content into a winning, incredibly persuasive content asset that performs value for you. It teaches people insights. It makes people feel like they've found someone they can trust who gets them, and it's either going to make them or save money. See what I did there? I, in fact, practice what I preach.